Hi there. Thanks for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Artcast, a show where two visual storytellers get together on a regular basis and take on various topics that occur to one when one takes on the endeavor of communicating visually. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist, which is to say, a person who makes graphic novels and then teaches classes on how to do just that. The other host is.
Hi, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I'm a user experience and game designer, and we talked about what those are in last week's episode. So, at least
So if you want to
user
know what that
experience.
is, download episode 246.
That's right.
Game designer, we know what that is. You make gameful experiences.
Mhm. Yeah.
Digital, tabletop. What are you doing? Amiibos?
What's that one? Weebos?
Amiibo? Amiibo.
Amiibo. Yeah. That'd be fun. That I would enjoy that kind of gig. So there can be a lot of interrelatedness as far as gameful design. You think about the kind of if you want playful experiences as a part of your user experience, thinking of games and how um, a game is sort of a system that people can volunteer to join and interact with, and it's got a feedback loop, and it probably has some kind of malleable challenge that likely increases as your skill increases, and that's a pretty interesting thing. And yeah, so I design and make games, and then sometimes, depending on where I'm, what my day job is, I will do game design there as well.
I just discovered recently, and I'm trying to look it up in my YouTube history, a series of videos where it's oh, what is the fellow's name? Mark Brown. Have you heard of this guy? Um, he
Rings a
does like
bell.
analysis of video games, and he talks about it in like a philosophical sense. What is a fun loop? And he
Yeah.
examines like Nintendo platform game design. Talks a lot about like design principles in video games. And even though I'm not, necessarily like a huge Mario aficionado, I've played like a handful of the Mario games. It's fascinating to listen to him like break down and analyze like how um, how the designers think about setting up an experience for people. And then he even like tried to put all his principles to work by using Mario Maker to make his own level uh,
Mm.
based on what he learned from examining Nintendo level design. Um, he's got 183,000 subscribers, so he doesn't need a plug from me. But pretty
Oh,
interesting stuff. I just
I have not checked him out, so no, I appreciate you mentioning him. Um, that's and so I guess there's a lot of common ground, I think, that we have as far as visual communication, that which is interactive. Honestly, it could go the full spectrum. A lot of times, still images are not included in the definition of interaction, but there's pretty much no media that isn't engaging your cognition, and now your expectations and your mental model of the world is being activated and participating in like forming your ideas and what you are choosing and how you will continue whatever, whether that is like reading direction on a page or and like examining the elements and their relationships and whatnot. There can be a lot of well, similarities, I think, and I think arguably there's pretty much no media that's not interactive to define it in a negative. Um, but yeah, and then you could ramp that up as far as there when there's a feedback loop and action reaction, because yeah, typically the less interactive media is stuff forming in your imagination. It's not actually morphing and changing as you go along. And but I think there's tons of common ground in the visual design principles and intentions. Also, just getting ideas across and conveying feelings, trying to cause some, like, whatever meaning you put into that work. You're hopefully transmitting that in some way through what you chose to make, and having some effect close to what you wanted, yeah, resonating in your audience.
and at least there's enough crossover that we have found 246 times to get together to talk about what we do.
Well, there was until now. Until that's
This is the one. This is the one. We walk away.
yeah. I don't think it's over rationalization. I don't think it's just being flippant. I think we found tons and tons of common ground.
Yeah. Okay. So, but yet, it's funny that we should joke around about like ending the show because we're actually playing around with something new this time. Playing around with a new format or a new approach to doing it just as an experiment. I think it's a great idea. You pitched this idea earlier this week, and I was like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds great. So potentially starting a new series, if this works, called Brain Trust. What do you mean by Brain Trust, Rob?
So let's see. Totally cribbing this idea from Pixar and a book I read a while back called Creative Confidence, and that let's see, the book Creative Confidence, it sort of goes behind the scenes in some of the creative processes that are at Pixar, and so how do ideas get stronger and better, and stories get refined and whatnot. And one of the techniques they use is this gathering of creative folks that's meant to be very egalitarian and very, like, anyone can share ideas and anyone can give feedback on ideas. That feedback is it's probably presented in a pretty skillful way, but it's but there's so much trust built up with those practicing in the room. There's a pretty low risk of I mean, a lot of times when you get feedback on your work, I especially early on, some of your first experiences asking what people think about something you made, it might go not so great, or because either it could go, well, you present it to an audience who is just purely supportive, only about telling you how much they love you, and they just use this as a new opportunity to say that. It's like, whatever you're sharing, you're not getting new information. They love you, but
Or it might be somebody who can't quite find the words to express what they don't like about something. Right? Just less that. Make it 10% not that, right? I mean, we've gotten feedback like that from clients in the past, right?
True. And then you end up needing to really interpret it, and that's a different interaction. So you're getting feedback from an audience, but that's not a brain trust situation. Brain trust situation is when you have maybe people of different skills, but and different angles and perspectives, but then at least somehow skillful practitioners of similar, like, they're storytellers, but maybe one of them is an interactive storyteller primarily, and one of them's more of a visual storyteller primarily, right? Just for instance. And let's see. Through that, okay, so someone's presenting ideas and getting feedback, and then you can incorporate that however you want. But it's an enriched, skillful environment, trusting, and and safe. Quoting this, I'm quoting an article quoting the book, which we'll put a link to this article in the show notes, which is a decent, like, snapshot of what the book is about. It's a Medium article. So Ed Catmull, the writer of the book, said that something like, this is sorry, because I'm quoting the article quoting Ed Catmull. So the article says, the job of the brain trust is to, quote, push toward excellence and root out mediocrity. And so you are approaching it with the intent of refining and having some kind of openness and like desire to improve it. So, and I'm definitely in that situation today, because I have a rough idea to share, and I thought, well, what if there were like, we've mentioned brain trust before in the episode, like, but almost as like a similar metaphor, but kind of talking about like your own private group. And I thought, well, what if that wasn't just a private group? What if it was just us on the show and anyone else who wants to participate? Because honestly, not just let's see, this podcast going on as long as it has, and those who have stuck with it, I mean, it's a pretty darn cool community. And that's not, not just going like, hey, Cleveland, I love it here. It's true. So like there's this mutual filtering that happens with the show. And anyway, so it should be trusting enough environment to give it a shot.
All right.
And so what if this was another one of our formats, right? We've got our
Where
we've got
occasionally we do a brain trust where one of us brings a project that they have started and want to refine it by pushing it towards excellence and helping to root out mediocrity by letting some trusted voices react to it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I like it. I thought it was a terrific idea to start doing that regularly on the show. If for no other reason, like all the reasons you listed, I think are terrific. But like at the very very least, we're modeling the activity so that people know what kind of reactions they might want to look for when seeking out their own brain trusts. If not here, someplace else, what kind of reactions do you and I personally think are healthy and useful? And what does it look like to commit to a project rather than committing to one's ego, right?
Or at least some healthy mix. It and I guess in the spirit of being kind to our egos, there's a handy tool that I've picked up through like meeting facilitation, and it may seem trite or silly or like some little silly dance or what have you, but I think it's nice because you can use this with I think a wide variety of folks that maybe aren't as practiced with critiquing and receiving, giving and receiving critique. You can always start out and try to frame what you're providing by either you can try I like or I wish statements, right? So an I like
Such
is
as
like reinforcing something positive that you're resonating with about the idea. The I wish is saying it's holding you accountable too, where you're unboxing something about it that you're like, this isn't meeting what I would expect. I wish. So, like for, let's say you have a visual design and there's so many elements and there's just not a lot of priority in there. And you could say, well, I wish the main character, it just stood out more. It seems like everything else has equal priority, right?
mm-hmm.
You say, I wish. It's softens the blow a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, okay, yes,
And
yes, it
that's not
does.
saying that's a ritual and everyone who submits a comment during the show needs to do that. I'm sharing this for, for when if you want to practice this, and especially if you're practicing it with folks who are new to doing critique.
Right. Yeah. The variation I do in my classrooms with my students, because you're talking about very, very fragile little souls who are like doing the courageous act of sharing their artwork with a grown up, And so I try to find 3 things I like, and I give a good reason why I like them. I don't just say I like that. I try to find a really good reason why I like what they just did. But then after those 3 things, I say, now here's where I think you could take it to the next level. This is where I think you could really send this thing over the fences. This is where you could really make this like super pro, is if you just take on this one extra challenge, right? But that's a little bit of a different context to what you're talking about here.
Not too different.
But the
That's
principles, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really resonates. In a way, I hear what you're describing is like it's offering some additive approach, but as like as an opportunity, as a thing you can opt in to take on, and a challenge is a nice way to frame it. So that's it's a practice. It's a practice all around, both in presenting things and also in getting the feedback, giving it as well.
So you want to hit the music so we can dive into the first part?
All right, let's do this.
That's staying the same. Here we go. Music time. Ah.
How do you know? How do you know?
What you need just now? That's one of my powers. All right. So we're now officially in the show. And, oh, Rob. So what's the topic? What's the project that you're bringing for us to kick around together?
Okay. Well, it's what I'm calling service-minded marketing principles. Uh, it's a it's something that comes up when these came up while I was asking myself, why am I sort of stuck when it comes to continually just experimenting and trying new things when it comes to marketing the stuff I make. I have a giant bias toward, oh, okay, I can pick a thing to make, and I'm happy to go about figuring out whatever it needs to happen to make the thing. No problem. Done it a lot. I've done it with some games, done it with web comics for multiple years. This podcast, other podcasts, the Unblocking Project, no big deal. The whether, especially if it's short to like medium length creative efforts, I've got that down. And it's like that, but that's the core thing. I love these products and these ideas. It's like the very self-motivating, that little machine of making those things and sharing them. Not a problem. Going through the effort to generate more awareness of those things, I've wrestled with that a lot. Just, mixed bag. Some success here and there, right? Like, honestly, we've tweaked our podcast format to include cross promotion of other stuff we make. And it works. It works. People engage with other stuff we make, not just the show, which is awesome. That's encouraging, but I haven't like pushed further on that. And I'm like, well, why? What's my problem? And it's like, I've had problems, choosing, okay, I've got an experiment. I'm going to post a link to This Panda Needs You, and maybe I'll do like a Twitter ad. And then partway through, it's like just the most unappealing task I can imagine. And I can't even tell you why at the time, which I know that means this is something to dig into, right? Mm-hmm. Because I fully have bought into it's necessary. I'm past this. I went through a stage of just, okay, this is what you do. You may just make more things, right? And making the things alone is what works. But it isn't. I mean, it's not what leads to a sustainable business.
Do you remember the early webcomics days? This would be like 13, 14 years ago. And that was the prevailing wisdom you want to build an audience, just make a comic and ship it every day. Just ship something every day and the audience will show up because people are searching for stuff, search engines will help you there. And that is a very alluring idea. That is so simple and so attractive, and it so lets us off the hook from having to tell our story to other people. If you want a job, you have to interview for it, and when you interview for a job, you have to make a case for why the company would benefit from having you there. I think personally, in my experience, I interview pretty well. Why can I do it that way, but I cannot do it as effectively on a public platform? This is just a moment of me just like commiserating with you and sharing your pain. Is like, for some reason, like I can do a talk. Like if you ask me to do a talk about a subject that I'm passionate about, I have no problem drafting up something for that. But if you ask me to do a talk about myself and what I do, and like turn it into an advertisement for my services that I can offer, it's so much harder. It's so much more challenging to find the narrative there. One-on-one interaction, interview situation, I feel like I excel at that. But something about getting up in front of 1,000 people and saying, like, here's why I'm pretty good at what I do, everybody. That's not easy.
I think so. Why is that? Why is that? Because I feel your pain as well. So, why might that be?
Let's see if I were to stage some guesses. In a one-on-one interview environment, there is a clear, there's a clear need that's being expressed, and I have been invited in to address that specific need. On a public platform of any kind, that need is much more ambiguous. I don't know what the needs are of everybody in the room. I don't know, and so instead of reacting to a stated need, I have to imagine a need. I think that's part of it. It's hard for me to guess what everybody wants. And I think also, if we were to like dig into like baggage and stuff, I think I want to please people. And if I don't have a specific slot to figure out how to make those people happy, that becomes a lot more tricky. So yeah, I don't know. Does that ring true for you at all?
It does. I can add to that too and say I don't want to misrepresent like
Yeah.
who I am and what I'm providing. And
Yep.
that the broader the audience goes, the tougher I find it to craft a message. When like, yeah, if I'm in a room giving a talk, that's a different thing, because now it's this there's this performance feedback loop going on, and inherently I can improvise and craft and see what makes sense. And in fact, you can on the spot ask the audience stuff right there, and you can hear them because you're right there with them, and then you go on and revise. And then that feels more natural. It feels more appealing. I've had more practice at it, so I'm just not as worried about that. So yeah, in person, one-on-one, in groups, all that's not a concern. Not worried about that. But in the sort of the anonymous marketing, the reaching out past, because there's a couple layers to it too, where it's like there's the folks who already know you, right? I think I could do better with that group, and I think I need to certainly do better with the group that doesn't know me. And that would be one of the functions of marketing. So
okay, and I know we're going to dive into actually like in the second section, which we'll get to pretty soon here, about you're going to get into some specific things that you want to pitch at me and see what I react to and the leaners react to.
Yeah, we're talking more about why hey, it's the marketing principles is the project that I want feedback on, and then why are we here? Laying some context.
Yeah. So another aspect I think makes this challenging, and what I'm going to be paying attention to or looking out for while you're telling me about the principles that you want to explore, is inboxes, right? Like I listened to Tyler James's Comics Launch podcast, which is an excellent podcast. Anybody who is interested in the subject really should go there and listen to this guy. He's really terrific at marketing himself, but then also like sharing what he learns from marketing himself on this podcast. And it's primarily aimed at people who want to run a Kickstarter, but I think a lot of what he talks about could go for just about any project that you want to build an audience around. And one of the primary pieces of advice that he rolls out every episode almost is get your email list going and send messages to that email list. And I've taken that so much to heart that when Dan Mishkin and I have been on the road for our new comics project, which I'll talk about in the last part of the show today, we've been trying to start building that email list on the road, like when we're at comic conventions, like trying to collect email addresses, and like the website for it has a thing like give us your email address, please. But at the same time, I'm so nervous about harassing people's inboxes because I get so many. I'm not even on that many lists. I'm not on that many lists, but I get so many emails, sometimes from certain creators, twice a week. Twice a week I'm getting emails from these people to the point where I'm just like archive. I don't have time. I don't have time to email the people back who are waiting for a response from me, much less read your latest little marketing idea. So I don't want to become the thing that gets swiped into the archive, right? And then also the emails where it's like, this is your last chance. I don't want to name names, but there's a certain company that I bought shoes from. And they email me so often with, this is your last chance, man. If not today, never. And I'm like, all right, well, archive because you tried to scare me.
We're going to eat all the shoes. You won't get them. You can't have them anymore. I'm eating them. That's what's going on. Last chance, buddy.
Oh man. And so like, yeah, like that's what
I didn't eat them, but now it's your this week for sure. It's your that's your. I'm hungry now. It's your last
the
chance.
ketchup's out. The ketchup's out. I got 2 big pieces of bread. I'm gonna do it. Don't try to stop me. Okay, stop me. Stop me.
Quick. LastChanceShoes.com.
Oh man. But yeah, I worry about that too, right? It's like, how do you do it without being a nuisance and without succumbing to, like, poke at people's pituitary gland. So is there anything else to put?
Yeah. That's the conundrum, right? So it's past baggage and whatever. There's a book worth mentioning. It's so read it a few years back. We've mentioned it on the show before, but it's Dan Pink's Marketing is Human. Is that what it is? I think
it's Selling is Human.
To Sell is Human. Yeah, thank you. Yes. And it reframes it because, and I agree with this because I've seen great examples. I've seen the work that Tyler James does. I've seen the rationale and examples presented in books like To Sell is Human, and felt the benefit of a variety of other companies doing this well. And I'm like, well, what does doing this well mean? What if I just tried to figure out what doing this well is for me, right? I'm not saying these principles are universal and must be applied everywhere, and I'm going on a campaign and whatever. But this is to help me get unstuck with and do these experiments, even if it's uncomfortable, where I can look back and say, but I believe in this. And if I believe in this, I should be able to go about making it happen in some small way and get that practice to become comfortable. So that's my hope. And so like what I hope to learn from this is like, well, when I present these, I want to hear, like, what do folks think? What's missing? And when you hear my goal, I suppose my goal is to get unstuck and to have some way that's better for reaching out to new folks and connecting with the folks that already know what I do and whatnot. I would love to hear questions, reactions, comments, and any other ideas to improve and refine this.
There's already some good comments in the chat, which I'll read a couple before we go to the first break. Jesse Gilbert's in there and says, self-promotion never made sense to me. I think the issue was I was thinking in terms of going into a bookstore and finding stuff that interests me, but books you find there are finished products. And me making a thing isn't a finished product available in a store, so my approach needs to be different, thus self-promoting. I would also say, Jesse, that going into a bookstore and looking for things, those books made it into the bookstore because somebody promoted them to the booksellers. There is a marketing team. There are outreach departments at these book publishers who send catalogs to these bookstores highlighting, this fall's, sampling of what's interesting and worth selling this year, right? Like, you guys all remember the J.C. Penney catalog when we were kids, those of us who are of a certain age, right? Same idea. These things go to bookstores and they are promoted, like Diamond catalog in comic stores. They have like a top picks section. In the book publishing world, there's Kirkus Star reviews. If you get a Kirkus Star review, that means that all the bookstores in the country are going to know who you are. So even for an unfinished, or even for like a finished thing, there was a ton of marketing that went into, in book publishing as well. Like when I did the Warren Commission report with Dan Mishkin and Ernie Colon, we had to take the early art samples and collect them into what's called a galley, or a pre-pub book. And what that is, it's like a cheap printed version of what the book will be. Uncorrected proofs, they're also called. And those get sent around to booksellers all over the country. So a lot of money and energy and thinking goes into the stuff that we see all over the place. Also you could think about checking out the Netflix series, The Toys That Made Us, where they talk about this too, like how toy lines live and die by marketing departments. There wouldn't be a He-Man cartoon if it wasn't for two guys in the marketing department who were trying to build this toy from scratch, and then they were trying to sell it to toy companies. The toy company said, or the toy sellers said, yeah, there's a toy here, but there's no story to it. What are you going to do? And they were like, oh, didn't we tell you we're making a cartoon? And they had no plans to make a cartoon before that moment. You know, it's just like it came out of nowhere. It was a Hail Mary pass to get these guys just to buy the darn toys. And so then a cartoon got made, right? So, yeah.
That's pretty awesome. So yeah, that's the toys that made us. Is that what that is?
Oh, have you seen this, Rob? The toys that made us?
Okay, yeah. No, I've seen it in in the sea of Netflix options. I've heard about it. I've heard great things, but I've not watched it yet.
I'll say this. It was one final plug for that show because yes, it's about 80s toys, and I have an interest in that as a guy who grew up in the 80s. But I also think that I would love to make it mandatory watching for my students because so much of it is about the desperate decisions that were made under deadline, under stress, and just totally haphazardly in order to just get the stuff out the door that becomes iconic and classic imagery. So like the fact that He-Man rides a Battle Cat was a last minute desperate decision. It was not contrived, or not contrived. It was not imagined in some work of great creative genius. It was they needed an extra vehicle for the toy line. The deadline was the next day. They didn't have any money to make a new design of, like what they call tooling to make the machinery to make the new vehicle. So they grabbed a tiger from another toy line at Mattel called Big Jim, and the scale was all off. And so one of the toy designers said, like, the tiger's too big. It's like the size of a horse. And they're like, we'll just put He-Man on the cat, and he'll just ride it, right? And and this becomes Battle Cat, yeah. Right? And wow. What I love about that is it demystifies this idea that all ideas have to come from this like sacred, holy place, fully formed and ready to go. No, a lot of times, like some of the best stuff that happens is just like, it's not working. What do we do to make it work? Well, stick some gum right there and then get it out the door, So
I love it. I've got to see this. Yeah, this is the constraints help. And this is some of the my intent behind the constraints. It's not saying that it's like, well, what kind of marketing? Why? And if I'm, spinning my wheels trying to draft something, hopefully these principles are useful and I can get unstuck with them in a variety of ways, both with like, why am I doing this marketing? Don't walk away from this task. It is important. It has a great purpose. And here's some guidelines or some territory to work within. That's like, you thought about this already. This is what you believe in. Go do that. And then, all right, get on with this thing, ship Battle Cat, whatever.
Yeah. Just paint it green. Get it out of here. That's so great. Oh, I was so delighted by that story. Okay. Well, you ready to take a break and then we can dive into like what the principles are that you're wrestling with and see if we can't find some ways to push towards excellence and, switch out some of that mediocrity?
I look forward to having a mediocrity-ectomy.
All right. Well, we'll do just that in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. But first, we got to thank some people who make this show possible. Those people happen to be oh, wait a minute. I just hit the wrong button. I hit the wrong button. Yeah, I don't want to make scary music for this part. Yeah. This is the nice part. Got to thank some people who Gotta thank the people who support us on Patreon. Yes, patreon.com/leanintoart is the website. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote, whatever you can afford. Well, like $1. It's as little as $1 a month, and that helps make the show more sustainable. And we want to thank 5 people who've been doing exactly that. First, we want to thank the mysterious K. We still don't know who the heck you are, but we appreciate your support. We are so grateful that you believe in us and the work that we do. And then Merjam. Merjam, you can find on Twitter at MYRJAMVDV. Thank you, Merjam, for supporting us. Mark Falk. You can find Mark on Twitter at Radomir. Thank you, Mark. Also, David Say, longtime friend of the show. Also been on the show several times. Creator of the Emergent Task Planner, the ETP, which, how many times have you heard us say that? Take a drink. You can find Dave Say on Twitter at Dave Say, S-E-A-H. Thank you, Dave. And finally, Mushin Girl. Thank you so much for supporting us, Mushin Girl, and showing up for the live streams and interacting with us. It means a lot to us. And you can join them at patreon.com/leanintoart, where you'll find all the shows that we create, as well as the extra leans, the shows we record only for supporters on Patreon, and those posts become an open mic thread where you can talk about whatever you want in a safe place where only leaners hang out. Once again, patreon.com/leanintoart. Thank you, everybody, for supporting us there. It means a lot to us.
It really does. Thank you.
All right.
I love that ad spot.
What?
That it's so pleasant. The joyful guitar, the gratitude, genuine. We appreciate our supporters so much. I love it. I love that ad spot.
Oh, your analytical eye was open there.
Yeah.
Thinking about as we move on to the next section. Speaking of the next section, time to go there. This is all about getting Rob pumped up, everybody, because we're treading into areas where he feels discomfort, maybe a little bit of anxiety.
Now you're breaking the feeling. That was off.
This is like before you go on to do a talk and people come to you like, "Are you nervous? Are you nervous?" And they talk to another person, "Are you nervous?" Yeah, I get what you're doing, but shut up. You're empathizing with me, and I appreciate it. But you know what? Now I am nervous. I wasn't nervous, but now I am.
I was
nervous.
pretty psyched before. Yeah.
All right. So, marketing principles I'm considering that you are considering. What are you considering, Rob?
Yeah. So principles for service-minded marketing. The idea being that, so what if I really emphasize the idea that, I mean, if someone isn't aware of what I'm doing, and apply this to yourself as well, they could never possibly benefit from it, right? So then this is part of helping others with what you do, is spreading awareness. It's inherently tied. If you really wish to, get the stuff you do out there in the hands of people, and have those people know that it came from you. And this is so like it's a part of being reliable and recognizable and stuff like that. So first principle. These jump all over, so they're not in particular order, but I'm going to read them in order that I captured them on the page. And it was a little bit sort of train of thought as I initially captured them. So anyway, communicate with interesting layers, both emotional and rational appeal, with little to no survival brain appeal. So I'm not going to eat your shoes, or I'm not going to eat the shoes I want you to buy from me, right? I'm not going to scare you with these ideas. Your shoes, you won't, I wouldn't use that kind of approach, or overuse it, right? So the idea would be, show and tell why the thing I'm marketing is useful and fun. These are sub bullets behind the principle. Communicate with interesting layers, both emotional and rational, or with both kinds of appeal, with little to no survival brain appeal. Which means, I'm not using fear and sex and all that stuff, right? Or not overly using it. So show and tell why this thing I'm marketing is useful and fun. So what benefits you may find. So emphasize the passion and love about this thing we both might care about. Marketing is more than a funnel to lure people through. So a lot of times, lizard brain stuff is just to get you to hurry up, click on the thing, convert. That's where I measure. Fear tactics, they're right out. I just don't want to do it. All right, there you go. There's a principle. Hit me.
You want me to react to that?
Yeah.
To refine an idea, like fear tactics are right out, I think is, you're not going to get much pushback from me on that as a rule. However, I would push back on the idea that surely there's got to be some instances where scarcity marketing is not purely crudely manipulative. And what I mean by that is like, there is a scarcity in the sense of your time, right? So if you're doing like some kind of promotion that's going to require any extra effort on your part, like say like if I'm running a certain sale on mini comics in my Tiny Astronaut store, like it might be that like, okay, these 2 weeks in November, I have a little bit of a later schedule, so maybe I want to run a promotion for like, it's half off mini comics, and then I know I'm going to be doing some extra trips to the post office to mail them out, right? But I'm only going to do it for that 2 weeks because then as my schedule fills up with other things. I won't have that extra time to run to the post office, right? Like I know I've run like promotions on my website with that in mind, and I felt like felt like a to me at least it felt more honest because there was a scarcity involved. It wasn't that I was going to eat the shoes. It was just that look, I don't have the bandwidth to be attending to this as much later, so I'll create an event right now for everybody to hang out at this thing. Like when people open up commissions, right? Oh, I've got a couple extra hours this week. I might do some commissions this week, right? Um,
Great
so
point.
surely, like the refinement of like defining the scarcity marketing a little bit more clearly is to identify what it is that you precisely won't do. What will you do? What won't you do? I don't know. Does that belong in a principle statement?
Belongs in my principal statement. That's great. Because yeah, this is meant to be that thing I just pull out. So I'm probably going to like when this is done, it's going to sit in like my day planner as one of these little half pages that it's like a reference touchstone thing of like, all right, got a marketing task, and some, for some reason I'm stuck or not feeling it, or I just need a refresh. I want that page always at hand, for the next whatever, few months, year, what have you. And yeah, I would love that kind of thing. Like a little reference table of will and won't, and it's a nice clear set of criteria to work from. I like it.
Let's see, what else am I reacting to? Marketing is more than a funnel to lure people into and through. You said something that wasn't in the text about like, measurement, right? Like, well, that's the way you measure, is that like how many people went through the marketing funnel, I should say. What I like about that it's using a negative to describe a positive, in that this is, I'm gonna use some catchphrasey kind of stuff, Rob, but like it is about relationship building, right? And it is about like network building, and it is about community building, and reliance on one or two of those sides too much, I feel like, well, it's imbalanced, right? If it's like, oh, it's all about community, it's in nothing else, and the money, it doesn't matter, right? Well, but this goes back to your coat of arms, where it's like to engage in sustainable trade. Well, yes, it's not just about building the numbers in my email list and find out how many of them go through my marketing funnels. This is also about there's the intangible and social component, which reminds you to investigate. And here's where I'd say level up. Can you define what that social component means to you? And what is a healthy way of building that social component? And this is something I think we both struggle with a lot, is finding the bandwidth to be present for the squishier parts, the non-measurement parts, the intangible parts of building those relationships, right?
Yes. This a couple of times you've hit on some themes that are in my next principle. So
okay, well, you want to just move on to that then? It sounds like if I'm already headed there.
Yeah, no, and just this might be a good natural segue. So one could think, if we're presenting like, hey, I have a few draft pages of a story, and we're doing this in a brain trust feedback, whatever, right? And so I might say, hey, oh yeah, good point. I have, let's go to page 2 where this stuff is, I do get into this. Okay, so next principle, embrace sustainability, which includes both my well-being and the audience's well-being. Get paid for trade, value for value.
Which means you're going to interrupt the show every 25 minutes to say, are you enjoying this? Do you really enjoy this? Then you should pledge. And if you pledge, you'll get a mug, right?
Ooh. No, not now, but I could imagine.
No, that's the old joke, though. I mean, that's been like done on like a bunch of Saturday Night Live episodes.
Because that's National Public Radio stuff, right?
Yeah. There's a Simpsons episode where Betty White's doing one of those pledge-a-thons. She's like, if you're watching PBS for free, you're a thief. Which is like, I've actually heard some pledge drives where they've come close to saying that outright, but Like, do your part. Everybody else is doing their part. Do your part. You know, it's like, wow,
This
that's a
person
little bit hard.
super proud for doing their part. I'm
Right.
proud of them, and they're proud of them.
And I'm not going to say shame, but I'm going to heavily imply it. And I'm going to lower my
Mhm.
eyelids just a little bit.
You feel what I'm not saying? All right.
All right.
So
But
yeah, embrace sustainability, which includes both my well-being, and the audience's well-being. Get paid for trade, value for value.
okay.
Um, so this then the sub bullets, get are like the weaker thoughts under the main thought, right? So more draftish, right? So but link not, but this is all a draft and needs reactions and feedback. Okay, so link to, mention, pitch my projects that cost money to use or buy. Um, Seek to grow the products I make. So I'm trying not to embellish. Okay, and then next, the more I sell and serve, the more I can focus on serving. So
Could you elaborate on that last point a little bit? I think I know what you mean there, but I'd rather hear it from you.
okay, so the generating more awareness of, let's say, one of the games I make, or um, should I put some things out in an Etsy store, what have you, or my existing Gumroad store, all this stuff. The more that sells, that's actually good, right? It's not just like that's a desirable outcome, which is not, it's kind of obvious, but like that projects that have a return, some return there, a greater return, can help me grow capacity to do more. So, for instance, that could be maybe, I'm not saying I'm not the I could do this as side projects and have a day job, but maybe I could hire people to help me out, and weave together teams in some way when there's a revenue stream to make that easier to do, or a more
Yeah.
robust revenue stream. And so that I think the outcome of that is, well, I'm serving my audience more.
And yes, when you are hustling less, then that means that boy, this is an irony of the whole thing. The less you have to hustle, the more time you have to attend to the people who are actually interacting with your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which can include making more stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So both.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, more robust. Like you pointed out, both community, and I wrote the word transactions, like in your feedback in the prior principle,
Mhm.
and yeah, having some healthy mix of both would more capacity to address both.
Right. I'm trying to think what else I'm reacting to here. Seek to grow the products I make. Link to, mention, pitch my projects. No arguments there. Um, Embrace sustainability. It's both my well-being, the audience's well-being. So, do you have any sense of what an email from the Rob Stenzinger mailing list would look like then? Like when you talk about like your well-being, the audience's
Yeah, that's a
well-being.
good point. So what does that that
I think I just jumped to the next point, didn't I?
I think you are. I'm scrolling down the document. So yeah. So the next principle is make the marketing message as service minded as possible. Even marketing is a creation to serve the audience. And some bullet points to support this: bring small newness, show and demonstrate my desire to continue serving, make it easy to do the right thing, enjoy the message itself, and act on the message, show gratitude and appreciation through the message, and provide something of benefit within the marketing or easily accessible via the marketing. So maybe it's a link to a PDF. It doesn't mean, so you don't want to have a message that's all laden with too much media and whatever. Be a big download. So maybe it can't be immediately in the message, but available quickly from it. But the idea would be that this is helpful. And so some formats like back in the day, if we dust off the tome of, lean into art mailing list emails, dust everywhere. We would send out some cheeky fun introduction, checking in, and then share some links. And then it was be a combination of links that we thought were useful, and also to stuff we recently made.
Mm-hmm.
I think that fits the pattern. But it, could go further than that too, because there could be some small thing about that message in particular that just isn't mentioned or used anywhere else.
I don't see anything to push back in terms of principle on this. Enjoy the message, act on the message. Make it easy to do the right thing. Making the marketing message as service-minded as possible. Even marketing is a creation to serve the audience. Now, I guess, again, I don't know if what I'm about to say is something that even belongs in a principle statement, but it's just like in terms of like specificity, like digging into specificity in order to like see if I fully understand what you're trying to say here. If marketing is a creation to serve the audience. So when I think of like a service-minded post, I think of something where like I subscribe to Jessica Abel's mailing list, and she shares all these stories and resources. Like, here's like a spreadsheet that I use to track projects. Here's another tool that I use for this. Well, I would quickly run out of emails to send like that because I only have like a small number of tools that have served me well. And I'm trying out new things every once in a while, but usually not like nothing that I could like say like, oh, here's a link to Trello. Right. And I don't necessarily have like an essay on how I think about Trello. But if I were to say, like, we talk about things like Thunder Punch Daily, where it's like, here's an essay that I just constructed about how I think about sound design or something like that. I feel like that's a service-minded product of sorts that's intended to serve the audience. Is that what you're talking about? Like something where it's like the message is meant to serve, not necessarily like there's not like a link to a tool with an affiliate link necessarily.
No, not necessarily. It's that's part of there's a tension in this work, and to create the marketing message and have it be useful. It can't be some expensive to produce work in and of itself. So it has to be efficient, but even in being efficient, I mean, it can be efficient with my time and efficient with the audience's time. And then so hopefully someone can easily choose, is there anything here for me or not? And if there is, oh, it's a fun idea. It's a reminder of a helpful, timely thing that I made before, which is probably what I would do is share things that I made before, and with some fresh insight about it, to contextualize it. And
so bring small newness, emphasize small on newness. So it's something where I could say like, here's a story I did 10, 15 years ago, and here's a few new thoughts that go with this thing that I haven't thought about in a long time. So surely you haven't thought about it in a long time, if you're aware of it at all. That kind of small newness.
Exactly. Or, true. Yeah. It's probably written word newness, but it could be, maybe it's maybe it's an audio file, maybe it's a doodle or whatever, some kind of sketch thing, whatever. But it would be something that was efficient, and maybe that I had around incidentally that I hadn't shared out yet, or maybe I have a new caption for some drawing I did as part of the unblocking project. That would be a pretty easy source for me.
Yeah, you have a pretty big bank of material from the unblocking project.
Yeah.
Do you still have all that stuff?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's its own blog basically on interactive-storyteller.com.
For those who don't know what the unblocking project is, what if you could remind everybody what that was, Rob? What experiment you ran?
So I do get a lot of enjoyment out of sharing stuff that I made. And one of the most efficient things that I can share is a doodle, or, maybe sketch, maybe digital painting, but like not putting this extreme cost on, like every single day I want to get something that's takes a lot to finish. Like this should be between like 5 to 20 minutes at the most of effort, but to try to do this for every single day for a year. And I did it for, a year and some small change, where just a little bit leading into 2015, then a little bit after, I published a drawing and shared it out. Every day. And I explored tons of different ideas because through this. It's like I have like small product types of things where I'm like, I did a bunch of sketches of faces at in different emotions that I'm like, oh, I should turn that into a mini comic or a zine. Haven't done it yet, but it's still there. I can still do it. And then lots and lots of other experiments and character ideas and what have you. That's where the two pizza team came from as a concept, for instance. So
Wow.
yeah, it's so that act of just daily thing, because, well, I hadn't had that. There's something about it, like creating something frequently is very satisfying, and sharing it is even better. So that was a great practice, and it felt like I was getting unblocked creatively. That's why I called it unblocking. And for some reason, I like to talk about positive stuff with a negative word. So it's my brand.
Well, we're learning. Yeah, that could be part of your creative voice. Yeah, I guess the trick is like, how do you make the marketing part feel like that, where it's like this thing you could check in on every day, and it's just part of that cycle. We can get to the manage the marketing principle that you listed. Like, just don't set and forget, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So should we keep rolling?
Yeah, let's keep rolling.
Let's see. I'm checking in the chat. Keep on. Some fun reactions in the chat. Let's see. Appropriate service. Considering sustainability from multiple angles, ideally find a way to serve all of these audiences. And so this is where the secondary bullet points under the main point are actually even more important. So what if through this active marketing, I served these 4 audiences? It serves, well, the target audience, but it serves also friends of the target audience, and serves me, and serves the community of practitioners who do similar things to me as I do. That's like a what if thing. Like that may be way too much, but so maybe it's not a hard requirement where every single message I send out has to have all 4 audiences, needs met. But wouldn't that be something if it did?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think
Does it
about
sound overly ambitious, you think, or?
Oh, it sounds wonderful, is what it sounds like. I'm trying to think of something that I've done recently that came close to serving multiple audiences. So Ann and I have been on this book tour, and we've developed this workshop where it came out of wanting to create an activity for kids to do that was related to our book, but it wasn't just purely, now just do exactly what we did. Let's all make a comic about rockets together. What do you like about rockets? Instead, it's like we looked at what we did and we said, like, well, we had to really ask ourselves, like, why we're passionate about this topic, and how can we break it down into simple things to simply explain it so that anybody can understand the principles of this thing called rocketry, right? Oh, all right, we'll do a workshop where we ask the kids to write down a topic they're passionate about or a topic they're knowledgeable about. Break it into 5 chunks. What are the 5 things you need to know about why Minecraft is the coolest thing ever? What are the 5 things you need to know about tying your shoes, right? Something that's like, and then we walk them through 20 minutes of comics instruction. Here's how shape, size, line, and color work. You design a character using those principles to put it in action. Oh, we can tell this is a bad guy because it uses these shapes and these colors. This is a good guy because it uses these shapes and these colors. It's a bit close up, far away, how all that works. And then we have walk them through making a mini comic zine. And, we fold a piece of paper 8 times and cut it once to turn it into a little mini comic. And then we set them loose making their own comics, their instructional comics, right? And so it serves two purposes in that, like, especially when we do this in front of parents and educators, where it's like we're walking the kids through how to do a report, essentially, how to communicate what they know about something in a way that's meaningful to other people. And we're also having them explore a new way of communicating, i.e., comics, instead of pure written word or using PowerPoint or something like that. And so when we've been in environments when there's teachers or educators, librarians, or parents around, they and the kids both get something really positive out of that experience. It's not just, oh, well, how delightful the kids get this distraction. They get to draw comics for a little while. Now let's go home, read some real books, right? And we also get to advocate for comics as a medium by showing, like, oh, you can tell all kinds of stories with it, right? So, like, the way we've been marketing it to libraries is like, yeah, the kids are going to learn two things at once. They're going to learn how comics work, how to communicate through comics, but they're also going to learn how to simplify and clarify ideas so they can accurately or clearly communicate their knowledge on a topic to somebody, which we found is very, very effective at getting educators signed on to having us come to their schools or their libraries. So anyway, that was a long way of getting at this idea of, like, I think that's a noble ambition, is to try to find, like, can you serve multiple audiences at the same time? When you say friends of the audience, like, what does that look like?
So people can share it, where essentially they're joining in on the service of like, I think I can help someone I know by giving them this thing.
Okay. Right. So the way I found out about the ETP, the Emergent Task Planner, was Anne sent it to me. She sent me the article on David Zay's website, right? So, like, how do you communicate its utility in a way that gets somebody excited, where they say, I have to tell all my friends about this.
Yeah. And whether it's just inherently fun or interesting, or useful.
Yeah. The utility angle, I think, is it's a hard one to pin down, but when you get it, when you actually have that explaining a product's utility or a thought's utility, man, that pushes all my buttons the right way. I think it does for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's ideally it's a similar thing to what I think a lot of folks who publish whatever they do in on the web, on the internet, in some way, shape, or form. It's, people want things to get reshared, but what's a way to get that behavior that's where it's like mutually beneficial,
right?
And my hunch is when it's like your primary audience, it's like, there's someone who gets this email, this message or whatever, and is like, yeah, this is just like the thing I was talking about with my friend or whatever. And then they share it. So they get to help others with this too. And then, now you're allowed to, help. Is now more folks are aware of what you do in a way that that isn't just an anonymous blast, right? Even if it's a targeted ad, because you go through ad platforms and you're going to pick lots of criteria and demographics, which may or may not mean anything related to what you're trying, who you're trying to reach, because a lot of times demographics don't necessarily hit. They talk about interests, but not necessarily behaviors, right? So if you're trying to reach people who post comics, there's not a lot of you're not going to see that criteria on an ad platform, right?
So are you talking about something like this? Like, this goes back to that Medium post that you were talking about earlier with the Ed Catmull quote. And there's this area that's highlighted. When I hover over it, look what happens. It gives you this sharing option where it basically writes the tweet for me, right? Is that how that works?
Yeah.
If I click
that's
on the
one
Twitter
form
icon,
of it, right? Where now you are sharing a thing that you think is of benefit to people you know. in the case of a tweet, it's like in a broad sense. But what I was describing in this principle is just literally sharing it with a friend, someone, just a person Could be in conversation, could be forwarding an email, it could be lots of things.
So essentially, the principle is looking for ways to encourage people to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's encouraged, but also be worth it. Just this could be the hang up thing of like this making it easy to do the right thing. I think adding that principle, mixing that together probably does mean asking for it, right? To say, yeah, if you thought this was useful, forward it along.
So that could be okay. Here's again, this goes to my classroom experiences. Is like the way I just had this conversation with Anne recently where we were really arguing over this idea of like storytelling to manipulate people. And like we were both getting really hung up on this word manipulation. Then I remembered something. I think it was on Lena Dart. You and I had a conversation where like, manipulation isn't necessarily an evil thing, like is like what is a storyteller trying to do? But make people feel feelings. Like I'm being manipulated when I cry at the end of the Iron Giant, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a storyteller like playing with my feelings. But like I use that kind of storytelling in my classroom all the time to get the students to do things that I want them to do that I know will be beneficial to them, right? Mm-hmm. So where I'm going with this is there was this one little shy kid in my classroom. This is a couple years back, and she would not draw. 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, showing up every time, showing up to class even early, but she did not want to draw in front of me or anybody in the room. And I said, this will not do. And I conferred with my brain trust of people who do a lot of school visits. I'm like, what do I do about this kid? I'm really worried. And somebody said, well, it's possible that she's, paralyzed by praise. And if she's in an environment where she's always being told how talented she is, and now she's in an environment where she's on equal standing with everybody and is no longer the special kid, that could be what's stopping her from sharing what she's got. So I came in the next week and I brought in like drawings from when I was younger than her or her age that I did. And I was telling how I didn't like to share this with anybody. And I was really nervous about it because I thought people were going to say that, maybe my art's not as good as I thought it was. And you know what? Some of the kids in the class really loved it. And there was one kid who was like an even better artist than me. And he gave me some ideas on how to make my work better. And my work got so much better because of that. The next week, the kid was drawing in class, right? Now, maybe it was my story. Maybe it wasn't. But my point is that like, I do this all the time where I tell that the story was not 100% true. But it was the idea behind it was true. Mm-hmm. So now I think like, wow, what would a series of emails from Rob look like where he tells stories of how he came across some breakthrough in his work or some awesome new tool because a buddy shared a link or a buddy happened to pass it in front of him. And at first he thought, what is this? But then you discover the utility in this. And so it's just like the series of stories of like discovery and leveling up that are a very quiet reminder of, if you found this useful, maybe you should, or here's my challenge to you today. If you found something useful, share it with a friend, right? That kind of idea.
Yeah. And I think the tone can really affect a message, right? That's the, someone saying like, well, to pick on the shoe example, right? Hey, our shoes are on sale for a limited time. We got a special deal from the distributor and it works for us to pass it along during this time window. And, after this date and time, like now it's back to regular price, which we do our best to, make our things affordable day to day. But right now it's special time. So hope you come on in, join us. That's a different tone than, the shoe eating bit.
Right. Last chance, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Carrie, or Mushin Girl, is in the chat and said, the friend sharing aspect is precisely how I found out about the show, Lean to Art. So, yeah, I mean, it's not always top of mind when we're listening and enjoying something or engaging with something to tell other people about it. Unless some delightful aspect about it. Like, for instance, I just recommended a podcast to a friend because I heard one of the hosts say something where it was like, that addresses a conversation that I had with that friend some time back, right? Like, hey, remember when we talked about this? Listen to this episode. Or in the case of the Emergent Task Planner, it solved a very specific problem for me, and it continues to be a very useful utility in my daily life. So of course I want to talk about it, you know, and I'm delighted by it. So how can you find the things in your work that delight people and show? Well, I guess that's where surveys could come in too, right? Like collecting that information from your community to find out what aspects of the thing are delightful to them.
Yeah. And honestly, it could be conversations, surveys that's it's something, right? The best data ever is something that happened in the world and you're able to observe it. And getting people to talk about stuff, that's good too. Especially if it's, you know, direct conversation. Then, you know, the absence of that, yeah, okay, survey, it's okay tool. But you get more, you're floating further away from like directly actionable observational evidence once you get out there, because when you're interviewing someone and getting you can inquire in a more in-depth way and find themes in what you discover and whatnot, especially if you have more than one conversation. But yeah, totally. Not to just, I'm going UX snob on you. So that's just a little, that's like a mini guide of, and for actually an awesome guide on like flavors of research and what's really beneficial and useful. I highly recommend Erica Hall's book called Just Enough Research, which is published over at, what's that? No,
A Book Apart, Just Enough Research.
Book Apart. There you go. Thank you.
I got it pulled up on screen now. Look at that. That's service, everybody. I'm underscoring and highlighting one of the delightful aspects of our show is that while Rob talks about it, I find the link to put in our show notes and pull it up on screen for you to see. abookapart.com.
You would be a good friend if you're finding this useful. I think you probably know someone that it would get that same delight. You want them to feel that too, don't you? I'm practicing.
Yes.
Don't hate
practicing for the ad spot that we're going to do in a second. So how about we save the final principle, manage the marketing, don't just send and forget, and talk about bandwidth on this and how you can possibly think about managing that bandwidth for the final thought. What do you say?
Love it. Perfect timing. And stay tuned for that.
There's another marketing thing. Stick around. I was listening to a podcast where they actually, before they do their ad breaks, they go, you're listening to this podcast, stick around, there's more to come. I'm like, dude, that seems like such an old way of doing ad breaks. That felt like it comes from the 80s, where it's like, we'll be back after these messages, you know? Which is my way of winding up before I say, like, we'll be back in about 1 minute and 30 seconds with our final thought. But before we do that, we've got to thank some people who make this show possible. A couple more people who happen to be named Rob and Jerzy. And I introduced myself as a cartoonist and teaching artist, which is to say a person who makes graphic novels and then teaches people how to make graphic novels. And the graphic novel that I made recently this year, released just a few months ago, only like 3 months ago, 2 months ago, is called Science Comics Rockets at sciencecomicsrockets.com. That's where you can find information about it. You can also find out about the next tour stop we're going to be at. Our next stop is at MICE in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We're going to be tabling at the, what is it, the Massachusetts Independent Cartoonist Expo, Comics Expo. And we're going to be leading a workshop there as well. What is Science Comics Rockets? It is the history and science of rockets as told by the animals who participated in rocket history. Who's it for? It's really aimed at middle grade, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. But we wrote it in a way that we hope it's delightful for all ages. And we've heard from adults who've read the book who really enjoyed it as well. What utility will you get out of it? Well, one, you're going to be more conversant in physics. You're going to learn about Newton's laws of motion. You're going to learn about G-force and how that works. We'll learn about how gyroscopes and gimbals work to help guide rockets. You're going to learn a little bit about history of rocket development. You're going to learn about like early, rocket makers who created rockets for fireworks, people who used it to blow things up and people up. Also learn about how, things like Project Paperclip, where the American government said, "Hey, Nazi scientists, did you build this rocket?" And they said, "No." And they said, "Too bad. We were hoping to forgive some war crimes and hire the creators." I said, "Oh, that rocket. That's our rocket. We made it." And how they, erased their identities and bleached their backgrounds to bring them into the United States and help them develop the rockets that took us to the moon. Ooh, that's an icky, weird thing to talk about. All the weird things that we're complicit in. But yes, it's all told in a very funny and entertaining way in Science Comics Rockets at sciencecomicsrockets.com. You know something that's not icky in complicated to talk about, Rob?
I think I might have an idea.
I bet it has to do with pandas and blocks. Right? You take block stacking of pandas, and like there is no ambiguity in there. That's just all just pure joy, right? I mean, the website's even yellow. What's yellow? Yellow's the color of joy.
It's well, thank you. It's This Panda Needs You is a game that I make, and actually I co-designed with my wife, Kate, and created with the intention of making an approachable, fun game for those young ones who just get first started interacting with like an iPad or a small mobile device, right? And it turns out it's actually it's a mellow, calm game for all ages, as we've discovered and received in feedback. So what it is your job is to help this little panda, stack the blocks. What's funny is this panda is like exploring over like 50 levels, but every single time the blocks are fine when you find them, a cloud shows up, knocks them all down with the wind, and here you go, helping the panda put things back to the way they should be. As I mentioned, lots of levels, gets a little bit harder over time, but you're dealing with like physics and order and patterns, and that naturally gets harder when you have lots of blocks and different shapes and need to make room to stack them up. And that's why on the later levels there's a lot more blocks and they get a lot taller. And anyway, you can learn more about it at this-panda.com. It's available for so many platforms, probably one you already have: your iPhones, iPads, Android phones and tablets, Windows and Mac desktop. Works great on like a Windows Surface, like a Windows touch device.
This-panda.com. If you have purchased it, a really nice thing you could do is leaving a review, telling a friend, just helping more people discover this thing, right? Leaving a review is a really great way, or just give it however many stars you think it deserves. 5 or more. That helps more people find it as well. If you're here because you like the way we think about things and you're not so much into the stuff we make, that's fair enough. This show is the thing we make, and we got more self-contained things like it at leanitoart.com/workshops, where you can download self-contained video series based on workshops we've led in the classrooms at a price of your choosing, even free. You don't have to pay anything. You just download it and enjoy it. But if you enjoy it, a great thing you could do, like if you get something out of it, like if you're like, oh, wow, that helped me think about this thing in a whole new way. That was very entertaining, or whatever positive emotion or sentence you want to put to that. You could always purchase it as a gift for a friend. Then you're doing something nice for your friend, and you're helping give us like a little tip for the thing that we've made for you. If you're watching this video on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up right now helps more people find the show as well. If you're listening to it in a podcatcher like Apple Podcasts, giving it a 5-star review helps more people find the show as well. We appreciate everybody who's been doing those things. It means a lot to us.
Yes, it does. It's very awesome. Thank you so much. And that's honestly one of the inspirations for this. I really want to work through these issues, right? And we're going into our final thought, hitting the final bit of marketing principles. And again, if these are useful and I can act on them, that I think I should be able to do a little bit more for those folks who already know me. For instance, folks who have already downloaded stuff via my Gumroad presence, which is Jerzy and I each have like some Gumroad stuff that links to from leanitoart.com/workshops directly related to our topic today. Is like, that's a group of people I want to reach out to again. All right.
Troy Shadowing Tronics is in the chat and reminding us of like the commercial bumpers that used to. He knows how to. We come from very similar worldviews when it comes to cartoons, and like the we now return to the Transformers animation. I don't know if you remember these, Rob, where it's like show like Metroplex transform or Triptychon transform, or Jazz would like slide into the scene in car form and then like transform and flip around backwards and fire his gun as he's running off of the screen. Then the Transformers logo would pop up. I need to
Hmm.
grab some of those audios and use those as transitions for our ad breaks. That'd be pretty good. The GI Joe one was not quite as good. It was just the logo, which is like, it's a little bit more boring.
Yeah.
Um, but Silver and the Periodic Forces, which is a comic I did in 2005, which was a reimagining of the very first comic I made when I was a kid. Actually, we did put commercial bumpers and fake commercial spots in the middle of the comic to like replicate that feeling. Um, what was the? I came up with a breakfast cereal. I think it was like Mathematic Munchies. It was like some kind of like math-based Lucky Charms kind of thing. Anyway,
That's
uh,
yeah. I mean, we could make our own, right? It'd
that's
be a
true.
fun little mini creative exercise. Add a little newness.
Hi, this is Rob. Stick around. There's more to come. Ding.
Okay, we'll see.
I sold them on it, everybody. Okay. So, final thought time. Managing the marketing, don't just set and forget. What do you mean?
Well, um, I think so. A lot of times with marketing, you have an event or a situation like there's a window of time when it makes sense to do one marketing effort versus another, and that's a campaign. And so you may have goals for the campaign and some kind of plan for tending to it to meet your goals. Um, and then and I think using time as a purposeful constraint will help, because you mentioned earlier that even if you're not like you're dealing with stock and supplies and getting something at a certain rate and then being able to offer a deal or whatever, you're still dealing with other genuine scarcity, which I thought was a super good point, where like your time is something that it's like you have availability that you've set aside during this time, and that in and of itself, like, okay, basic campaign around that availability. um and then let's see, setting up an engine, kind of like, well, what we do on Lean Into Art, cross promoting projects. I've done a little bit of this with a couple, let's see, for sure. Yeah, two mini comics I've made. Heavyweight Lifting of the Heart and Born Guitarist. Those are both Art Geek Zoo's side stories, right? And also made them after the existence of Guitar Fretter, another game that I created. That's all about memorizing the note positions on a guitar fretboard and making a game out of it. It's a little bit like, I don't know, Galaga meets Memory Match. You can learn more about that at guitarfretter.com. And it's also available on all the platforms that this Panda Needs You is available on. So, such as this, organically mentioning something, and not shying away from it. I think
Yeah.
it makes sense. Yeah. Then also make note of this work, or like when it is part of a campaign. I think a little bit like the whittling episode we talked about, like having a little
Yeah.
bit of log to track, like, here's some stuff I did about marketing.
Yep.
That might help me figure out a process over time. Stuff that's
Yeah.
working.
The moment I started reading your notes for this episode, I thought, like, man, there's got to be a way. Just like you find time every week to do some kind of self care, in addition to managing all the craziness that goes on with pursuing creative endeavors. Surely there's a way to, and especially like you said, based on our whittling episode, score an hour a week, 2 hours every 2 weeks, something like that, where you can like score out. This is a block of time where I'm going to put something like collecting stories around. So one of the things that I really am enjoying about the Patreon app is the stories feature that's ripping off of Instagram stories. But I love Instagram stories because it's the whole like I can just share quick little things. It's very easy to capture them in the moment. It's really easy to put a little bit of context on them in terms of like a blurb of text. And I was putting stuff away in the studio the other night, and I came across all this old artwork of mine that I had pulled out for an event but hadn't put away yet. So as I was putting it away, I'm like, hey, there's stuff here that I haven't shared, like possibly ever. We're talking about artwork from like 1991. I found like two Spider-Man pages I drew when I was in high school, you know? And so I snapped some quick pictures of them, shared them on my Patreon feed. and put a little context like, here's some stuff I drew in 1991. Um, could there be a way to bake in an hour here, an hour there, and really schedule it to say, like, okay, you found the thing, you snapped a picture. Now write 3 paragraphs, like write an essay around that, right? What do you think about when you look back at this old stuff? So now I've got a Medium article I can share, right? Or I've got a Fabulous Secrets microcast to share on my Patreon, something like that. Taking it one footstep beyond that, sharing with a blurb to now I'm making a point with sharing something that was drawn. The work was done literally 27 years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that idea.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. So I'm encouraged that it seems like a lot of these like could benefit from maybe a little extra clarity, a little more refinement here and there, but maybe there's a directional usefulness and at least so principles help with fitness of ideas of like, well, hey, there's a platform out there that uses some kind of targeting that I don't like or doesn't feel like a good I don't really like ads presented to me in the way this platform behaves, but I had a task to go publish a new ad for this campaign, and I'm looking at maybe considering using this platform. But wait a minute, I have a principle, use tools, platforms, and techniques that I'm okay with being used on, for, and targeting me and those close to me. So,
Right.
so this is what that's a, so that's a worthwhile constraint. Making sure that I put care into the if I'm going to do an ad campaign, like to go toward platforms that I've liked the ads I've seen or that kind of thing. It seems more relevant. I think it's worth tuning into that. So that's but I also challenge myself with this as well, because what if I do have a negative impression of a particular platform related to the ads? That could just be my own baggage about ads as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I was gonna say, like, how do you create a check to make sure that you're not the guy going, I don't know about that?
exactly.
Which is a conversation we were having back in January, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I've caught myself being that guy. I've caught myself on many occasions doing the whole like, I don't know about that. And then somebody explains it to me. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. What was I reacting to? Oh, past experience and baggage and unprocessed things. So, yeah, how do you create a check on yourself to make sure that you're reacting to a disagreement with principle or approach and not just negatively reacting to something as a knee jerk?
I think
How
this
do you
could be a
anti?
good like brain trust check-in, right? So maybe it's like, hey, I've got this impression. What do you think?
Yeah,
Try and get outside your own head and hear from others.
yeah,
That's a good reminder. And then so that's it. That's all the principles I drafted. Now, do you think there is a utility to this, or is it just sort of
yeah. I think you've created a good framework to navigate your decision making process on how you approach a plan, and to check versus all of these different principles to make sure that your plan is going to be tasteful to you. Something I wrote down very early on in our discussion was, you were talking about how I think one thing that you and I both react. I'm going to speak for you now, Rob. Check this out. I think we both react negatively to a lot of marketing advice. Is that it is issued many times, not always, but it's issued as a one size fits all solution. These are the 3 steps doing this thing, and that's like saying here's the 3 steps to making comics. Get this pen, get that paper, draw this way. Here's the how to make comics the Marvel way. Which, I've always given that book a good thrashing about being like propaganda, even though there's it's an immeasurably useful book. provided that you understand that it's propaganda. But they telegraph it right on the cover, the Marvel way, not your way, the Marvel way, right? So I think reframing what you've done with these principles, you've framed up what I'm hearing anyway is here's the Rob way, here's marketing the Rob way, and now I can find the tools that fit with the Rob way. Just like you find your own art style, just like you find your own approach to doing things. There's no right or wrong approach. There's just the approach that works for you, and so you've clearly laid out what are the ideas behind the approach that feels most tasteful to you. If there's any clarity that needs to be made in there, I just feel like just well, that was what I was reacting to, was like asking for a little specificity on some of the points, right? So when you say manage the marketing, don't just set and forget. Okay, you're saying attend to it. I would push back and say, but also put in another line that reminds you that this is a finite resource and that the time should be budgeted. The tension between those 2 points. Yes, attend to it all the time. Yes, remind yourself you can't attend to it all the time. Where's the middle ground in there? How can you think about tools and approaches that make both ends of that spectrum happy?
These are super helpful reactions and thoughts and insights and analysis, right? Where this, even like, honestly, I'm surprised that there was as much hey, this sounds useful as reaction. I was surprised. I thought I would have a little more, I don't know, some
so
bigger
Rob?
gaps. Yeah. Or yeah, exactly. Or like, and this would be useful. Why? Like maybe I'm overthinking it or whatever. But like you nailed this, where the whole Marvel way analogy, where this is like, I'm trying to find out what is marketing my way, so I can find more comfort and purpose in going about this task that I believe needs to happen.
Yeah. I mean, outlining, and this is actually a chapter in Rockets, is the chapter on Mary Sherman Morgan, where she is faced with the problem of discovering a new, more efficient fuel for the Mercury Redstone rocket that took Explorer 1 into orbit. And she had a deadline, and so she wrote out a list of what she needed to know about this fuel. Like, what are the characteristics this fuel should have? And that would help. And so like the whole chapter is about like writing down what you think you need to know is a good starting point for discovering what you need to know. So what you did, exactly what she did, in that you define the characteristics. Maybe I don't have the plan in place yet. Maybe I don't have the tools in place yet. But here are the characteristics that it has to have in order for it to be the thing that I need it to be.
That's exactly what I did. And I don't think that approach fits any, is one size fits all by any means, because I do get weird looks as far as when I talk about how I'm thinking through a thing. So anyway, this was really, really helpful. Thank you for.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, that's what a brain trust episode should be for.
How interesting.
So we did the proof of concept.
Yeah. This might be a reusable format.
Might be.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rob, we did a podcast. Thank you for bringing this idea to the show. I think it was fun to do. I think it was a good exercise, and for me, what I got out of it was an exercise in listening carefully. And I don't know if I did throughout the entire show, but there were points where I felt like, okay, this is what it means to listen carefully.
That was awesome. Yeah, this was a really helpful critique session. It's a form of critique, and no, I appreciate it very, very much. And that's another thing where this is a useful. It's like a performance, but it's turning critique into a performance. So that's hopefully was fun for everyone who's tuned in, both right now live and those who have downloaded.
All right, and for those who, well, for both parties, those who are watching live and those who downloaded, the show is recorded every Thursday, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. We stream it live on YouTube and then collect it as a podcast at patreon.com/leanintoart. And we will be back soon with another episode. Until next time, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Instagram.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks for hanging out, everybody.
Yes, thank you very much.